None of them want to get it doesn't
just going to pull up this bit there, so it's, yeah, kind of.
We'd like to welcome you all here today for the annual Clarke Commemoration in Clogheen. First we'll have a minute of silence thinking of all those who died for the cause of Irish freedom. Now it's time to lay wreaths. I'd like to call on, there'll be a wreath laid by James Toomey, who was from a family steeped in republicanism. He's the grandson of Thomas Toomey, one of the original Round Hunger strikers, and son of Billy, who was interned in the Curragh in the 30s and 40s. Tyrone Republicans have honoured Thomas Clarke by sending a wreath to be laid Dungannon is where Tom grew up, and there's a lovely memorial there to Tom. Tipperary. Tipperary Independent Republicans will lay wreaths now. The group is now working to look after our monuments across the county and to reinvigorate commemorations like this one here. Last year they supported Tom and Robert O'Keefe and Kathleen Maloney to commemorate the forgotten soldier John Mahoney.
Willie.
And now a wreath laid by Willie O'Donnell.
For the Safe House family, Sean Hogan, Vinnie Lacey, all those ones.
Yes. And now we have the poem Easter 1916 by W.B. Yeats. Okay, right. Yeah. I have met them at close of day, coming with vivid faces, coming from counter or desk among grey 18th century houses. I have passed with a nod of the head, or polite meaningless words. I have lingered a while and said polite meaningless words. And though before I had done of a mocking tale or a jibe to please a companion around the fire at the club, being certain that day that I would lived where motley is worn, all changed utterly, a terrible beauty is born. Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart, or when it may suffice. This is heaven's part, our part, to murmur name upon name, as a mother names her child, when sleep comes at last has come, on limbs that run wild. Where is it but nightfall? No one, no, not night, but death. Was it needless death after all? For England may keep faith, for all that is done and said. We know their dreams enough, to know that they dreamed and are dead. And what in excess of love bewildered them till they died. I write it out in a verse, MacDonaghan, MacBride and Connolly and Pearce, now and in time to be, whenever green is worn, or change utterly, a terrible beauty is born.
The struggle for Irish freedom has gone on for centuries, and in the course of it, a well-trodden path has been made that leads to the scaffold and to prison. Many of our revered dead had trod that path, and it was these memories that inspired me with sufficient courage to walk part of the path, of the way along that path with an upright head. The words of Thomas J. Clarke. When the British occupying forces put him up against the wall of the Stonebreakers Wall in Kilmainham Jail just before 3 a.m. on the 3rd of May 1916 and shot Tom, those who gave the orders probably thought they had put an end to the Republic, the 32-county Republic that had been proclaimed by the leaders of the 1916 rebellion. But how wrong they were, and how wrong they still are. You cannot put an idea up against a wall and shoot it. And although those great martyrs were shot by British lead and buried in unmarked graves, covered in quicklime, the Republic proclaimed lived on. And the same idealism and belief in the right of all 32 counties of Éire to be free still lives on today. All the revisionist historians, politicians, fake Republicans, and their WEF masters in Europe, and of course the British Crown and their occupying army still camped in 6 of our counties know this. Recently I heard one of our so-called leaders talk about how we the Irish need to get away from our narrow view of what it means to be Irish. Standing here today in the town that Mary Palmer, Tom Clarke's mother, was reared in and married James, Tom's father in, we are part of the small group of believers who every Easter all over Ireland make the pilgrimage to our Republican commemorations to pay homage to our heroes. Here in the lovely Vee Valley, we are in an area steeped in the Republican tradition. The Fenians roamed the Boreens and sought refuge in the homes all along the Knockmeal Downs and the Galties. Father Sheehy rests out the road from here in Shanrahan, a rebel priest who dared to stand against the tyranny of British rule. He embodied the spirit of the Irish. He was not afraid to make a stand with his people. The White Boys first gathered a few miles from here in Drumlemon. They were a continuation of the rebellion against British occupation. Near my own home, Cranavone at Rooska Castle, James Butler fought against Cromwell at Fethard, and he too went to his death at the end of a British rope. This area was the landscape of revolution, where during the Tan War and Civil War, Sean Hogan and Dinny Lacey took on the British Empire with their flying columns. All along the V Valley, from the Galties to the Knockmeal Downs, the local IRA active service units, backed by the great women of the safe houses and coming them on. These were the people who continued the Tipperary tradition of resistance to British tyranny. It is probably no coincidence that Tom Clarke's mother hailed from here. In Kathleen Clarke, Tom's wife's book, Revolutionary Woman, she states, his mother was a Tipperary woman and his father from the Ballyshannon area of Leitrim. He was 10 years old when his mother and father brought him from South Africa to Ireland. He was wildly excited, coming into a country which was interwoven into all his childish dreams and imagination. A land of romance, heroism, a fairyland where everything was beautiful. There was no place in the world to compare with Tipperary and Ireland. As a result of his mother's constant talk of that wonderful place, the year he first saw Ireland was the year of the 1867 Rising, and his head was full in awe and stories of the Fenians. Is it any wonder, and hearing all the talk of the Fenians' attempt to free Ireland, that he developed that all-absorbing love for Ireland, for which no sacrifice was too great to make? In Ireland today, we have those who fear to speak of the great men of 1916. They will call the war from 1919 to 22 the War of Independence. It was not the war that brought us our freedom. It was just the latest in a series of armed rebellions. It was the Tan War. The Free State that came into existence was not what Thomas J. Clarke and all our heroes died for. The hypocrisy today of those that lay reach for the men of 1916 and then throw shade on the brave men who defended Catholics in the apartheid state of Northern Ireland in the 1970s and 80s. They fought the same illegal occupying army that Sean Tracy, Sean Hogan and all the greats of the IRA fought against down here. These are the fake Republicans who on one hand will sing the Galtee Mountain Boy with gusto, praise Dan Breen and Dinny Lacey. They talk of how the old IRA were somehow different than all the freedom fighters that came after. This is our history, and it's so important that it is told. We cannot erase it or should not attempt to sanitize it to suit an agenda. It's also important to remember Irish men and women in British-controlled prisons in Ireland today, many of whom would not be incarcerated only for colonial past and Britain's interference on our island. Last year we honoured John Mahoney, the forgotten soldier, murdered by the Free State, buried in an unmarked grave. He too paid the ultimate price for believing in the ideals and principles of the 1916 Rising. Moved from Kilkenny prison so he would not be seen as dying a Republican martyr in a Free State prison, his mother knew the authorities' intention, and in a letter written in the 30s while applying for a pension for John's service, she wrote, "The authorities, by moving John from Kilkenny jail to Cashel poorhouse, knew what they were doing. They made sure my son died, a pauper, not a hero. It might have taken us 100 years to uncover John's story, but now he is rightfully remembered and is a hero here locally and will forever be remembered. Before that, we stood beside our bravest of the brave, the men of the 3rd Tipperary Brigade, IRA, in February last year, and I was honoured to give the oration, my first one, for Paddy McDonagh and Dinny Lacey. Two great Tipperary men who, like Tom Clarke, had a real love of their country. They were the principal few who refused to bend the knee to a foreign occupier and their homegrown supporters. This is part of our culture, our history. It is what makes us who we are. Father Geoffrey Keating is buried in Tubred, just a few miles from here. He was hunted by the British just because he dared to collect and write down our ancient Irish history. The British were attempting to erase our culture, our Irish identity. Our ancient symbol, the harp, that fantastic musical instrument, was also a target of British repression. Cromwell's army tried to finish the harps of Tipperary. Thousands of harps were torn from walls of cabins, where they were regarded as sacred. They failed, and their efforts to rid Tipperary of our culture and tradition failed. Today, we have a hate speech law that is trying to do similar. Isn't it amazing that this is happening in the very country that was always a beacon for culture, the land whose monks travelled Europe to collect banned manuscripts and save them? Thomas James Clarke was born in England on March 11, 1858. His father James hailed from Carrigal in Leitrim and his mother Mary Palmer from here in Clogheen. In 1883, Tom took part in the Dynamite campaign, initiated by the famous Fenian Jeremiah O'Donovan Rossa. An informer infiltrated the movement, and in June 1883, at the age of 25, Tom was sentenced to penal servitude and sent to Chatham Prison, one of the toughest prisons in England. In 1898, Tom was released on licence, aged 40. He was reunited with his mum and sister Hannah, but his father had died in 1894. He met his wife, Kathleen, while visiting his friend and fellow Fenian John Daly in Limerick. John was the city's first nationalist mayor. Unable to find work in Ireland, the engaged couple emigrated and were married in 1901. From 1906 to 1907, they ran a market garden in Long Island, America. Tom felt a war in Europe was on the horizon in which Britain would be embroiled, and knew this would be to Eyre's advantage. Tom persuaded Kathleen to return home, and she knew this was his life's ambition and would not stand in his way. In 1908, Tom established a tobacconist shop in Parnell Street. Tom worked over the next few years, leading up to the rise in re-establishing an IRB movement, working with Bulmer Hobson and the great Sean McDermott. Tom never lost sight of his lifelong ambition to free Ireland, all 32 counties of British occupation. In 1915, we had the great Republican funeral of O'Donovan Rossa. Tom chose a teacher, Patrick Pearse, to give the oration, and the famous words of advice were issued by Tom to Pearse: "Make it as hot as hell." In 1916, Tom Clarke was 59 years old. The hard years he had spent in prison had left its mark on him physically. Mentally, he was still an unrepentant Fenian, and it was this love of his native land that drove him on. On the Tuesday, the 18th of April of Easter week 1916, Kathleen describes Tom coming home late in a joyous and excited mood. He informed her that the rising was fixed to start on the following Sunday, that a proclamation had been drawn to which he was the first signatory. Tom had asked not to be the first, but he explained how Thomas MacDonagh had spoke and said, "You, sir, by your example, your courage, your enthusiasm, have led us younger men to where we are today." He then said if Tom did not agree to accept it, he would not sign it. Tom agreed, and at that meeting, Tom, as first signatory, became president, and Pearse was made Commander-in-Chief of Ireland and Connolly Commander of Dublin. Kathleen describes a feeling of her world falling apart around her as she listened to Tom, who she described as being wild with excitement. "I did not want to dampen his spirit. Though I knew the rising had to be, I could see no military success against the British Empire." Tom continued normal life as the RIC and G-men were keeping a close eye on him. Kathleen took the 3 kids to Limerick so she would be free to fulfil her role in coming them on during the rising. The plan to rise on Sunday was called off when McNeill realised a rising was to happen. He issued countermanding orders. Despite this, the rising did go ahead on the Monday. Tom Clarke was the first to enter the GPO and described to Kathleen in Kilmainham after the rising how he had shot the lock off the door in the GPO and ordered all inside out with their hands up. He also recounted that he had led the last charge out of the GPO. He spent the week encouraging and advising. On the 29th of April, the surrender was issued in Moore Street. They debated what to do, and Tom was the only one who was against surrendering. All the participants from the GPO were herded into a garden in front of the rotunda. A British officer called Lee Wilson treated Tom deplorably and this was not forgotten, with Wilson being shot by the IRA a few years later. Kathleen was brought to Kilmainham to visit him, and she described Tom as being in an exalted state of mind. He told her, "My comrades and I believe we have struck the first successful blow for freedom, and so sure as we are going out this morning, so sure will freedom come as a direct result of our action. It will not come today or tomorrow, and between this and freedom, Ireland will go through hell, but she will never lie down again until she has attained full freedom. With this belief, we die happy. I am happy and satisfied at what we have accomplished." Tom Clarke was executed on May the 3rd, 1916, with Patrick Pearse and another great Tipperary man to remember today, Thomas MacDonagh. Kathleen lost a baby shortly after the rising. She went on to become a senator and TD and was elected Dublin's Lord Mayor in 1939. She died in 1972, aged 94. To finish with a quote from Thomas Kent, who was executed, the great Cork man, in 1916. "Accursed be the false tongue of the raider, accursed be the sons of the Gael who would aid her. Let him who feels shame for his ancestor's story be gone from our pathway, let ours be the glory." Thank you very much. Berbua.
Seamus Hennessy will now play two tunes.